All right, here we go again. We're finishing our way through here. We'll come back to vesting and some of these other things, but we just did the inspection response. We're gonna jump into a short one, final walkthrough form. This needs to be done on every single property because here's the problem. If you don't do a final walkthrough on a house with a client, that's fine if it's their decision. But the day that you go close on a house after not offering a final walkthrough and not getting this signed, and you close on the house as a buyer, and then they go to move in and they go to take that first box into the basement and it's flooded. You could have known that prior to signing and the seller would have had to deal with it. The seller probably didn't hide it. The seller wasn't there. They're already in their other house. It's just been sitting vacant. And the septic is backing up into the house. And nobody had any idea because you guys, the buyers, didn't do what they should do to guard themselves. It's not a right or wrong thing to do one or not do one. It's a stupid thing to spend $300,000 on a house and not look at it right before you close just to make sure everything's still as you expect it to be. It'd be like buying a car, never seeing it, and taking an irrevocable delivery of it. No, you go to the dealership, your car comes in, go to the dealership, you check it out. Are there any scratches? Is there anything wrong right before you sign the papers and buy it? You may drive it, you may whatever, right? This is what you do with houses because if you don't, you're going to run into that scenario that I talked about, and it's your fault as a buyer's agent because you didn't tell your people. And you know what's real embarrassing is you're sitting at the table and a title company person says, "I'm sure you did a final walkthrough, but this is a form we need you to sign that just says you're taking the property in its current condition." And then your client looks at you and says, "We didn't do a final walkthrough. What's a final walkthrough?" "Oh, well, it's where some buyers like to..." Dude, that shows how inept you are and how not caring you are. You need to encourage them to do a final walkthrough prior to closing. A day before, 2 days before, day of, I don't care. I've got good reasons for all of those. I like it a day before, 2 days before, so that any issues can be corrected. But if they're still moving out, you're not going to necessarily know if there's issues, right? So doing it right before closing is pretty normal, though I don't love it because there's no time to correct anything. You have to then delay closing, which messes everything up. But it could be that they left 50 cinder blocks behind a shed. Those are supposed to be gone. So then you're going to need to show up to closing, have them sign a paper that survives closing that talks about removing the cinder blocks. And they're going to have to come back and do that. And then what happens is they drop one of those cinder blocks on the wellhead and break the wellhead. Now, what are we going to do? Like, break issue after issue after issue. You got to do a final walkthrough. When you do it, I'm not so picky about, but you got to get your people back in or do a video tour or something. And then this document gets signed. Okay? Property address will fill in. Buyer's names will automatically fill in. You got two options. It's super easy. So let's just read it though. The purchase agreement provides that the seller will deliver possession of the property to the buyer in the same condition as on the date the purchase agreement was executed. Normal wear and tear accepted. You know, the carpet is by default going to get the world's slightest bit of worse in the 4 weeks it took to close, or maybe a little scuff in the paint behind the couch when they move it nobody ever saw or knows about, and subject to any agreed upon repairs being completed. So it's going to be the same as it was, generally speaking, but all repairs that were agreed upon are going to be completed. Before closing, buyers should verify the condition of the property meets the terms of the purchase agreement, which is what we just stated. So check the box. Buyer walked through and reviewed the property on this date, or buyer chooses not to walk through or review the property before closing. I don't care which one they check, but they are making the decision. Listing by the brokers have no knowledge of defects in the property other than what's been disclosed. The brokers have no duty to inspect the property for unknown defects. It is the buyer's responsibility to have inspections completed. Buyer releases and holds harmless all brokers and their companies from any and all liability. Attorney's fees, costs arising out of the related to the inspection result, repair, disclosed defect, deficiency affecting the property. Parties agree that this acknowledgement may be transmitted between them electronically or digitally. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Either way, we said, hey, buyer, we should really think about walking this property one more time right before closing so that we're making sure we're buying what we think we're buying. Because we have had those issues. I remember one of my agents walked through a house right before closing and they went to the basement and the septic was currently spewing into the basement. Literally happening. Okay? Or the night before, I didn't have it happen the night before, but I do know of a story where I had lightning got struck 3 days before, so we had a backup closing, but we didn't do the final walkthrough yet, or we were the listing side, so they didn't do the final walkthrough yet, obviously, because it's too far away. But 1 day before, 2 days before is fine. 3 days before is a little long, but whatever. Anyway, things happen. I have a friend who had a story where the house burnt down the day of closing. Can you imagine? The seller's gone in Florida. The buyer didn't do a walkthrough. The house burned down. And the buyer buys the house because they don't know it. That's a big problem. Walk the property prior to closing. It doesn't eliminate all possibilities of problems, but it sure as heck makes it a lot closer to eliminating the problems, okay? Have them sign it, and it's done. This is for us. Doesn't have to go to the other side. It's just covers our butt that we gave them the opportunity and they chose not to, or we gave them the opportunity and they did, and they did it on this date. And then that means, boom, we did our part, okay? That is the final walkthrough form. Every single buyer, do not miss this form.